Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another great discussion in Everytown's leading Black gun violence prevention champions on the campaign trail, a virtual conversation series. If you're joining us for the first time, we are engaging in conversations with some Black voices in the gun violence prevention movement who are running for office or participating in the electoral process. Last week, we had a great discussion between Florida State Representative Pinterest Driscoll and my colleague Monisha Henley, which you can check out on Everytown's YouTube channel. My name is Ariel Cathcart, and my pronouns are she, hers, hers. I'm the Associate Director for Mayoral Outreach and Engagement at Everytown for Gun Safety. Today, I have the honor of representing the Everytown Victory Fund and speaking with one of the country's most dynamic mayors who are running for re-election, Mayor Brandon Scott, Baltimore, Maryland. Mayor Scott, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you, as always, for all the great work that Everytown does across the country each and every day. And of course, I would say right now, our thoughts are all with my brother mayor in Kansas City and his entire city.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to jump right in with the questioning. So, Mayor Scott, you're used to tough Baltimore politics at this point. But thinking back when you first started out, what motivated you to first run for office?
Well, the truth is, gun violence is what motivated me to run for office. I always tell everyone that I knew I wanted to be mayor when I was like 6 or 7 years old. And that really comes from a story that I told first publicly when I ran for mayor the first time. I was around 6 years old the first time I saw someone get shot in my neighborhood in Park Heights. And imagine living in a neighborhood, Ariel, where every third Saturday in May, the entire world descends on Park Heights, my neighborhood, for Preakness, a horse race, one of the Triple Crown, one of the three legs. And then every other day of the year, we weren't even seen as human. And after that shooting, I remember like hounding my parents consistently about why no one cared that we were just supposed to go back to school, go back to life as normal after it happened. Like no one cared that we all just witnessed this big tragic thing. And she just looked at me calm and said, if you want to change, you have to change it yourself. No one's going to do it for you. So I dedicated my life to that from that point on. And this is now my 17th year in City Hall. I came to City Hall first, working as a community liaison, working in the mayor's office of criminal justice and neighborhoods, working around public safety, even before I ran for city council the first time in 2011, and have been working each and every day to deal with this disease of gun violence because of how much it personally impacted my childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though the events leading up to is unfortunate, I'm always inspired by people's personal narrative connecting them to their purpose. So I'm sure, like myself and people watching, but I'm gonna put it on myself. You normally won't know what goes into running for office until you decide to actually do it. So, what's one or two things you discovered about running for office that completely took you by surprise when you first started out?
So I guess the funny part for me is the first time I ran for office, I was already 4 years into being in City Hall, right? So the first time I ran for office, nothing surprised me. In act, to be honest, my first election at City Council was the easiest election that I've ever had, right? Like because the neighborhood was so used to me and from my previous role. However, when I first started working on a campaign for then City Council President Stephanie Rawlings, I learned some things that I use each and every day. And I tell folks on my staff, young people that come to me interested for running for office, people that are just doing great work in communities. Number one is how resistant to change some people are. I always tell folks two things that people don't like. One is for things to remain the same. The second thing is for things to change. Change is hard, right? And that you have to not only convince people that they need change, but that the method that you're going to effect that change is not going to just totally disrupt their life unless absolutely necessary. But also the second thing is how much energy there is when groups of people come together to make something happen that's important, right? I've seen it. I started as an organizer, so I've seen that kind of work happen each and every day. And I think that you can never underestimate the power of people when they come together.
Absolutely. So, talking about how running on gun violence prevention isn't just a political issue to run on, but a life saving mechanism for folks in really not just Baltimore community, but for areas with robust Black communities across the country.
Yeah, I mean, for all of my lifetime, right? This was the political issue in Baltimore, right? It's been a foundational issue, not just here, but in places around the country. And only the only place in the world where the sanctity of guns is put before the sanctity of lives is right here in these United States of America, right? Whether it's a mass shooting that happened here in Brooklyn or after a Super Bowl parade, we have folks, especially those in power at the national level in Congress, who outweigh American lives, children, women, grandparents, people at church, street corners, supermarkets, every place that we know people have been shot and killed by an American right to have a gun. And that's something that needs to change. And we need it here in Baltimore. We needed a new approach to dealing with the disease of gun violence, right? Because every mayoral election in my lifetime, except the one that we're in right now, where the powers that be don't want to talk about homicides anymore because we had a historic drop of 20% last year because we developed this comprehensive approach to gun violence and our comprehensive violence prevention plan and are proving that the both and methods works, which means that they can be replicated across the country, which is going to come at a cost because there are people who depend on the old way. There are people who only believe in zero tolerance and locking up all the black and brown and poor people. And that's the only way to keep order and keep crime down in our country. We know that that's a falsehood. We've proven it here. It's been proven in other cities around the country. And that's why you see so many people fighting back against mayors like myself and others who have been leading in this way, because when you threaten someone's ecosystem, even if you're helping to save lives, if they're cutting off their pockets, if you're cutting off their viewpoints, if you're valuing groups of people who they don't think should be valued, they are going to try to flip the script. And that's why you're seeing the discussions that we're having, not just in Baltimore, but around the country about everything else but homicides and shootings that they thought they said were the only issue in these cities.
Yeah, and shout out to the 22% reduction. That's huge. That takes more than just thoughts and prayers. That actually takes effective strategy. So people often talk about the effects of gun violence on Baltimore, which is certainly important to talk about in solution-based conversation. But can you talk about some of the gun safety policies and programs that have been enacted in the city of Baltimore and how they've successfully saved lives?
Yeah, like I said, we in 2021, I put out our first ever comprehensive violence prevention plan, which ironically, Ariel, was now required by law because when I was city council president, I passed legislation that every 2 years, the mayor had to produce a comprehensive violence prevention plan, right? And led by our health commissioner because gun violence is a health issue. But when you think about that, that includes our group violence reduction strategy, our flagship gun reduction program, which is a both and approach. It's a focused deterrence model where we identify the folks who are the most likely to be the victim or perpetrator of gun violence in particular police districts, starting with our most violent, and we go to them. And they actually get a letter from me that says, we know who you are, we know what you do, we want you to stay alive. We'll give you every single resource or chance that you need, whether you need education, housing, relocation, substance abuse, job training, whatever it is, we'll give it to you. But if you don't take us up on that, the next group of people you hear from are going to be law enforcement. And people have taken us up on it. And we've seen it. It's been shown that GVRS in the Western District has reduced homicides by more than 30%, right? This is something that we've proven to work. And now we're in the Southwest District and we're now in the Central District in Baltimore. We're going to continue to grow that. We've also been building up our community violence intervention ecosystem here. We've already had our community violence interrupters through the city program of Safe Streets, but we're growing that with investments partially that we're doing with ARPA funding. I put $50 million into CVI here in Baltimore City, where we're in partners like We Are Us and Challenge the Change and Tendea Family. Organizations are in these communities that are doing the work each and every day. But we're also doing the work on the law enforcement side, holding people accountable at every level. We're not just stopping with the person pulling the trigger who has the gun. We're going after the traffickers. We're going after the organizations. And when they allow us to, we'll go after the manufacturers in the stores. We are not afraid to take on anybody in that stands in the way of us getting to the bottom of this gun violence. And most notably, recently, I even had to take on my friends at the ATF in order to get at the T-Hart Amendment that prevents me from knowing where these guns are coming from.
Okay, so coming up with the solutions to gun violence takes creativity and innovation, which you all just explained, which means thinking about this work in an intersectional and intergenerational way. In this moment where we amplify intersectionality and the intergenerational points, how has that shifted the way you and others think about gun violence prevention movement and cross movements?
Yeah, listen, we know that gun violence takes a toll on communities and families. It's not just individuals, and that impact is a lot longer than just that direct impact of the bullet. And it's hard for some folks to understand that, right? This the impact of these tough on crime, mass incarceration policies have actually hurt and created more violence. We have to tackle gun violence the right way and not go back to those old broken ways of the past. And one of the things that I always think about that was the most ridiculous, but that I have to live up to you to talk about how we're being very intentional and different these days is our ability to expand eligibility for victim services. In Baltimore City, until I was mayor, gunshot victims weren't offered victim services because they were thought as criminals. And if we want to prevent other people from being shot, the very people we should be talking to and providing service to are those who have already been shot. We know how these basic conflicts are creating violence now in cities and around the country. We have to attack it in that way. That's why you have to partner with those organizations that have relationships. When we're talking about some organizations will have better relationships with younger children and teenagers, right? You have to empower them and have people that are credible messengers in every walk of life in your community in order to get to the root of what's happening and break the cycle. You cannot just expect one organization, one agency, one elected official, one church, one mosque, one synagogue. It has to be everybody, and everybody plays a role in dealing with the cycle of violence.
Okay, so who are those on the ground organization that you partner with that we should be aware of?
Yeah, it's a lot of them. And if I forget anybody and they see this, you know I love you. Blame it up to the dad brain, not to the heart. This is a core part of our strategy. And I think it's important to know for me, this was always going to be a thing because before I was the mayor of Baltimore City, before I was city council president, when I was the city councilman, I co-founded and ran the largest anti-violence movement Baltimore's ever seen called 300 Men March with me. And it started with 1,000 of my friends, but it ended up being about 40 of my friends would actually go out every single Friday night into the neighborhoods where the violence was happening, talking with those and interceding in violence ourselves, right? So now that I knew so many of these other brothers and sisters who were affiliated with that work, that's how we're working with We Are Us, right? Who are out there doing that same exact thing today. Challenge to Change that I uplifted up, 10 Day of Family that I lifted up earlier on today, and then we have like Leader Project that we're working with. What we've been doing is granting out money through my mayor's office of neighborhood safety engagement, YAP, who is working with us on our GVRS strategy, right? Helping to bring all this ROCA, all of these organizations in Baltimore who are working with these individuals each and every day. And we're going to be bringing more and more and more to the table.
Okay, so I want to elevate the fact that you are a co-chair of Mayors Against Legal Guns, which is a bipartisan group of about 2,000 plus mayors from across the country dedicated to advocating for life-saving gun safety reforms. What has been being part of that set of co-chairs, has that meant for you in the city of Baltimore in terms of the goal of gun violence prevention?
For me, the biggest thing has been about the collaboration, but also the ability for myself and others, because we know when people think about this issue of dealing with gun violence and organizations, they've been thinking about a lot of folks just go straight to suburban, right? That's what they do. But for myself and Mayor Jones and Mayor Lucas, all these other folks are now uplifting the conversation, the importance of thinking about the totality, talk about the urban side and how that's just important, and for us to start to try to push policy and action that can be taken not just here locally but across the country in a synchronized way has been the best thing for me.
And there's a lot of folks watching, including young leaders who might want to run for office. What would be your advice to them?
Do it, but you don't have to wait to run to office to be a leader. Start in your community. Start early. Start like I did. Right. I always tell young people that my job today really isn't much different when I was Black Student Union president or on the school improvement team in high school, making decisions on behalf of my counterparts. But never let it be for the wrong reason. If you're thinking about wanting to make a bunch of money, if you're thinking about wanting to have time where you're always going to be with your family, where uh, if you cannot give yourself solely to other people for at least a 4 or 2 year period of time, this isn't for you. But if you really want to do impactful work that will change lives, that people will come up to you 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, and you won't even remember how you helped them, but you've been able to change their life, then this is what you should be doing, and start doing it now, working in your communities now. Don't let anyone tell you you're too young. They told me that. And now I'm the old man on the totem block at 39. So you can do it, and you can do it now. Just do it for the right reasons and the right way.
Absolutely. And my last and final questions in the context of family, how is it feeling having a newborn in the house?
It is the best. It's great. Now I got somebody that's up with me at 3 a.m. when I'm on like Zoom calls. So I don't feel as weird. But it's great. Charm is the best blessing in my life. And he's ready to walk to wear his Everytown shirt as soon as you guys send it to him.
Yep, yep, it's in the mail. Okay, thank you so much, Mary Scott, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. Be sure to join us next week for next week's conversation with Representative Jasmine Crockett from Texas.